Once, the sound of German boots made the world shake. They marched across borders with steel, fire, and fear. But today, those same boots walk a different path. Not to conquer, but to care. This is the story of a soldier, once feared, now reborn. Chapter 1. The First Fall, Versailles and a Silent Army. The war had ended, but the pain had just begun. Germany was quiet. Too quiet. Its cities were broken. Its people were hungry. And its army was gone. In 1918, the First World War came to a bloody end. Millions were dead. Germany had lost. But losing the war was not the worst part. The worst came after. In 1919, the victors gathered in France, at a grand palace, the Palace of Versailles. There they signed a treaty, a piece of paper. That would change everything. The Treaty of Versailles. It was not just a peace agreement. It was a punishment, a warning, a knife. Germany was blamed for the whole war. They were told, "You started it. You must pay." And so, they paid. In gold, in land, in pride, but worst of all, in power. The German army, once feared, was now crippled. No more than 100,000 men. No tanks, no planes, no submarines, no future. They called it a defensive army. But it could barely defend itself. The proud generals, gone. The strong divisions, broken. Even the horses were counted, every bullet watched. Germany was not allowed to dream of war again, not even in silence. And yet, in the hearts of many, a storm was growing. Fritz was 12 years old when his father came home, not as a hero, but as a shadow. His father wore a torn uniform, no medals, no smile, only silence. "Did we win, Papa?" Fritz asked. His father didn't answer. He just stared at the wall, day after day. He was once a soldier, now just a man with broken dreams. Across Germany, thousands of men were like him, silent, angry, lost. The army had once been the pride of the nation. It had marched with music, flags, and cheers. But now, it was forbidden to even train. Secretly, some officers kept meeting. In forests, in basements, they whispered about rebuilding. They spoke of strength, of revenge. But it was all just talk, because the world was watching. Britain, France, even the new League of Nations. Germany was not trusted, not forgiven, not free. The pain was deep, not just in soldiers, but in factories, schools, homes. The economy collapsed. Money was worthless. Bread cost a wheelbarrow full of cash. People were angry, ashamed, afraid, but they never forgot the army. The old power, the lost glory. Even children played with wooden guns, dreaming of battles they never saw, singing songs they didn't understand, in the ruins of defeat. A question echoed. Can a nation live without its army? Some said yes. Peace was better than pride. Others said no. Without an army, Germany had no soul. And so, the silence continued. Years passed. Wounds stayed open. Dreams stayed buried. But under the ground, seeds were growing. Seeds of anger, of revenge, of a second war. That had not yet begun. Chapter 2. Hitler's Rise, the Army Reborn. The silence was breaking, and a voice was rising. Germany was still wounded, still weak, still lost. But in beer halls, in secret meetings, in newspapers with bold black ink, a name kept appearing. A strange name. Adolf Hitler. He was not a general, not a king, not even a soldier anymore. But he had words, dangerous words, powerful words. He shouted in front of crowds, "Germany will rise again. The treaty is a shame. We need strength, pride, and an army." And the people listened. They were tired of feeling weak, tired of silence, tired of shame. And so, they clapped. Then they voted. Then they followed. In 1933, Hitler became Chancellor, the leader of Germany, the master of a broken nation. And he had a plan. The army must live again. But how? The treaty said no. The world said no. Hitler said yes. First, he built in secret, training camps, hidden, factories, disguised, uniforms, waiting. Then he made it public. He tore the Treaty of Versailles, with words, with tanks, with fire. The world watched, shocked, but slow to act. Hitler brought back conscription. Every man must join. Every boy must learn. Planes returned to the skies. Tanks rolled down the roads. Boots marched once more. The Wehrmacht was born. A new German army. But with an old soul. A soul of steel. A soul of war. The soldiers wore black boots and hard eyes. They trained day and night, not for defense, but for power, for revenge. Hitler gave them songs to sing, flags to carry, enemies to hate. He told them, "You are the new knights of Germany." And they believed him. Karl was 17. He dreamed of flying. In 1935, he joined the Luftwaffe, the new German Air Force. He wore a clean uniform. He sat in a fast plane. He felt proud. But one night, he wrote in his journal, "They teach us to fly, but also to hate. I wonder, where are we going? Where, indeed? Germany was rising, but not toward peace, toward Poland, toward France, toward war. Hitler promised safety. But he prepared for battle. Factories made bombs instead of bread. Schools taught loyalty, not questions. Books were burned. Voices were silenced. The army grew. And so did the fear. Europe started to worry. Britain warned. France waited. But no one stopped him. Not yet. In 1938, Hitler took Austria without a shot. The army marched in like a parade. The people cheered. The world sighed. Then Czechoslovakia, piece by piece. Then Poland. And with Poland came fire, explosions, death, World War II. The army was no longer silent. It roared. It crushed. It killed. It moved fast, with tanks, planes, and fear. People ran. Nations fell. The world changed. And behind it all was the man with the mustache and the army he built from shadows. The silence of Versailles was gone, and in its place, a storm. Chapter 3. Lightning War, the world trembles. It started with tanks and ended with fear. The year was 1939. The target, Poland. On the 1st of September, German soldiers crossed the border. Planes roared in the sky. Guns opened fire. It was fast. Too fast. The world watched, shocked. This was not like the old wars. This was something new, something terrifying. The Germans called it Blitzkrieg, lightning war. It moved like a storm. No warnings, no rest, no mercy. Tanks in front, planes above, soldiers behind. And fear everywhere. Cities fell in days. Bridges were broken. Phones went silent. People ran. But the army was faster. In just 3 weeks, Poland was broken. Germany took half. The Soviet Union took the rest. Europe gasped. This was real. This was war. Again. France and Britain declared war on Germany, but their armies didn't move. Not yet. Hitler smiled. He had tested the world, and the world was slow. Next came Denmark, then Norway, then Belgium, then the Netherlands. Each one fell like dominoes. Quick, brutal, cold. The German army was a machine, organized, trained, deadly. In Paris, people prayed. In London, they waited. But the Germans didn't wait. They moved through the Ardennes forest, a place the French thought was safe. They were wrong. In 6 short weeks, France was gone. Paris fell. The Eiffel Tower stood. But the French flag was down. The German flag waved above the city. Soldiers marched through the streets. Their boots hit the ground like thunder, their eyes full of pride. But not everyone felt proud. Hans was one of those soldiers, just 19, from Hamburg. He had trained hard. He believed in the mission. But when he saw an old woman crying in the street, when he saw a boy with no shoes, he looked away. That night, he wrote, "We win cities, but we lose something else. I don't know what. Maybe our soul?" Still, the war continued. Germany turned to the sky. It sent planes over Britain, hundreds, thousands. Bombs fell on London, day after day, night after night. But Britain did not fall. The people hid. They cried. They sang. And they waited. Back in Berlin, Hitler grew angry. This was not part of the plan. The war was supposed to be quick, clean, victorious. But now, it was becoming long and messy. Then came a bold decision, a dangerous one. In 1941, Germany turned east, toward a giant, toward the Soviet Union. It was called Operation Barbarossa. 3 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, a move of madness or power. At first, it worked. Cities fell. The Red Army ran. But the land was cold. The roads were long. The people were ready to fight. Winter came, and with it came death. The German army was still strong, but now it was tired, cold, bleeding. The soldiers didn't march anymore. They limped. They froze. They remembered the victories, but they felt the weight of war. In the West, the Allies were preparing. America had entered the war, and soon the world would push back. The lightning war was losing its spark. The German army had shocked the world. It had moved fast, hit hard, crushed many. But now it had enemies on all sides. The storm it created was turning against it. Chapter 4. Defeat and Shame, a Broken Uniform. The snow was red, red from blood, red from pain, red from the end of a dream. Germany's army had marched far, too far, into the east, into Russia. At first, they had won, fast, brutal, sharp. But winter came, and with winter came death. The soldiers were cold, hungry, tired. Engines froze, guns jammed, boots cracked. They had no coats, no warm food, no way back. The Soviet army was waiting, stronger now, angrier, and behind every tree there was danger. Stalingrad. One city, one battle. But for Germany, it was the beginning of the fall. They fought street by street, house by house, room by room. And then they stopped, surrounded, out of bullets, out of hope. In 1943, the German army surrendered in Stalingrad. Over 90,000 soldiers gave up. Only a few would ever return home. Germany was shocked. Hitler was furious. But the people, they began to doubt. More defeats followed. In Africa, Rommel's army lost ground. In Italy, the Allies landed, and in 1944, it happened. D-Day. Thousands of Allied soldiers landed on the beaches of Normandy, from the sea, from the sky. It was the biggest invasion in history. The German army tried to stop them, but it was too late. The West was falling. Bombs dropped on German cities. Day after day, night after night. Factories burned. Homes collapsed. Children cried. And the soldiers? They kept fighting, but with broken hearts and broken weapons. Hans, the young soldier from Paris, was now 23. He had seen too much, too many friends lost, too many lies. He wrote home. They told us we were heroes, but now we are shadows. We walk, but we are not alive. In 1945, Soviet tanks rolled into Berlin. The final battle had come. The city shook. The people hid. The dream ended. Hitler was gone. The government collapsed. The German army surrendered. The war was over. But the shame had just begun. The world saw what Germany had done. The crimes, the camps, the horror. The army was not only defeated, it was stained forever. Uniforms were burned, flags destroyed, songs silenced. Soldiers walked home with heads down. They were no longer feared. They were not welcomed. They were broken. Germany was divided, east and west. Two new countries, two new paths. But one truth remained. The German army was no more. Children asked, "Papa, were you a bad man?" And fathers had no answer. The world said, "Never again." No more war, no more armies, no more Germany with guns. But deep inside some hearts, there were questions. What is a nation without defense? What is honor without pride? In the silence after the war, new voices would rise, new ideas, new fears. But for now, Germany was quiet again. Very quiet. Of course. Here's the next chapter in your audiobook story. Chapter 5. Two Germanys, Two Armies. Germany lost the war, but the world was not at peace. The bombs had stopped. The soldiers had gone home. But the fear? It stayed. Europe was in ruins, and Germany was broken in two. In the West, there was freedom. In the East, control. Two sides, two flags, two futures. West Germany was supported by the United States, Britain, and France. East Germany was controlled by the Soviet Union. The people were the same, but the walls between them were rising. And with those walls came armies. Yes, Germany was building again. But not as one. In West Germany, the army was called the Bundeswehr. It was small, careful, watched. The world remembered the past, so this new army had rules. It could not invade. It could not grow too big. It must defend only. The soldiers wore new uniforms. They learned about peace, not just power, and they served a new idea, democracy. But in the East, things were different. The army there was the National Volksarmee, the People's Army. It looked strong. It marched like steel. It followed orders. But those orders came from far away, from Moscow. The Soviet Union wanted control. They gave tanks. They gave training. They gave fear. And the East German army became a tool of the Cold War. The Cold War. It was not a hot war. No battles on land, no cities in flames. But it was a war of spies, of secrets, of silence. West and East. They stared at each other, each ready, each waiting, each afraid. In Berlin, one city told the whole story. A city divided. One half free. One half locked behind walls and guards. At night, people whispered. Some tried to escape. Some were shot. The soldiers watched, guns ready, hands shaking. They wore the same face, but different uniforms. Inside both armies, soldiers had questions. Klaus, in the West, asked, "Why do we need guns if we want peace?" Peter, in the East, wrote, "I want to serve my country, but whose voice am I following?" The world looked at Germany, still nervous, still unsure. Could they trust this new army? Would it stay calm? Would it forget the past? The answer was not simple. Some people feared the army would grow too strong again. Others believed Germany needed to protect itself. And while politicians argued, soldiers trained. Day after day, marching, listening, waiting. Then something began to change. People in the East started to protest. They wanted more freedom. They wanted change. And in 1989, a miracle happened. The Berlin Wall fell. Families cried. Strangers hugged. Soldiers lowered their guns. Germany was won again. But now came a hard question. What do we do with two armies? One army had lived in freedom, the other under control. One army used NATO tools, the other Soviet tanks. One army trusted civilians, the other followed the party. Some said, "Let's build a new army. Together." Others said, "No, we can't mix them." In the end, East Germany's army was dissolved. Most soldiers were sent home. Some joined the new United Army, but not all. Weapons were sold. Tanks were scrapped. Old uniforms burned. The new army would be one, but the past would never be forgotten. Two Germanys had built two armies, but now one Germany had to build trust. Again, Chapter 6, Unity. But with conditions. The wall came down. But peace was not easy. November 1989. Crowds ran through Berlin's streets. People cried. They laughed. They sang. Germany was won again. After 40 years, families met again. East hugged West. Hope filled the air. But behind the joy came questions, serious ones. Two countries had become one. But what about the armies? The East German army was large, trained, armed. The West German army was smaller, modern, more trusted. Could they work together? Should they? The world was watching. The United States, France, Britain, and the Soviet Union. They remembered the old German army, the one that had brought war twice. Now they had a message. You can unite, but only with rules. In 1990, a deal was made, a big one. It was called the 2+4 Agreement. 2 Germanys, 4 powers. The agreement said, yes, Germany can unite. Yes, it can have an army. But it must never go to war again. It must never own nuclear weapons. It must cut the size of its army. East Germany's army was disbanded. Almost 90,000 soldiers were sent home. Tanks were sold. Fighter jets were destroyed. Uniforms disappeared. Some weapons were even sold to other countries. Turkey, Indonesia, Poland. It was the end of an army. Some soldiers felt angry. Some felt lost. Jens, an officer from East Germany, said, I trained for years. Now I am nobody. But others felt relief. One woman whispered, I'm glad my son won't wear that uniform. The new German army, the Bundeswehr, had to change too. It was no longer just for the West. It was for all Germans now. So it opened the doors. Some East soldiers joined, but only a few. Most were left behind. The army became smaller, slower, more careful. It now answered to the people, to the parliament, to democracy. It had new missions, not to attack, not to invade, but to help, to protect, to serve peace. Still, there was fear. Could Germany be trusted? Could this new army forget its past? In the 1990s, Germany began to send troops again, but this time for peace missions to the Balkans, to Africa, to Afghanistan. The soldiers wore helmets, carried medical kits, worked with the United Nations. It was a new image, from fighters to helpers. But inside Germany, not everyone agreed. Some said, we should do more, help more. Others said, no, we should stay quiet. The past is too dark. In the barracks, young soldiers trained. They learned history. They learned law. They learned respect. One general said, "We don't want perfect soldiers. We want responsible citizens in uniform." Germany had a new army, but it walked on thin ice. It had strength, but also limits. It had pride, but also shame. And always, the world watched, just in case. Unity came with joy, but also with warnings. The army was born again, but under many eyes. Chapter 7. Soldiers without a war. The guns were quiet, but the army stayed. Germany was now one country, one government, one flag. But what about the army? There were soldiers, there were tanks, there were planes, but no enemy, no war, no reason to fight. The Cold War had ended. The Berlin Wall was gone. The Soviet Union had collapsed. Germany was free. Europe was safer. And yet, the army remained, waiting, training, marching. Many Germans asked, "Why do we still need an army? There's no war. Are we preparing for something?" Some wanted to cut the army. Some wanted to close it. Others said, "We need it, just in case." Inside the barracks, life felt strange. Soldiers cleaned weapons they never used. They practiced drills with no mission. They waited for orders that never came. One young recruit wrote, "We wear the uniform, but we feel invisible." Germany was rich now, powerful, a leader in Europe. But its army? It was confused, lost between pride and guilt. Then came a call. Kosovo, 1999. War had returned to Europe, not in Germany, but close. Germany joined a NATO mission. For the first time since World War II, German soldiers left their land to take part in a military operation. They went to protect civilians, not to invade, not to conquer. It was a big moment, emotional, risky. Some Germans were proud. Finally, we help others. Some were afraid. What if we repeat the past? More missions followed. Afghanistan, Africa, Middle East. The German army was now a helper, a peacekeeper, a friend. But it wasn't easy. Soldiers returned home with stress. Some were wounded, some were silent. They had seen pain, and they carried it back. Still, the army tried to grow, to modernize, to adapt. But problems came. Helicopters broke down. Planes didn't fly. Tanks stopped in the field. Reports said, only a few vehicles are ready. Too many weapons are old. Soldiers don't have good equipment. One soldier joked, "We go to war with paper, not bullets." It was no longer a strong machine. It was called a paper army. In 2011, Germany ended mandatory service. Young men no longer had to join the army. Some said it was progress. Others said it was a mistake. The number of soldiers dropped. Recruitment became harder. Germany needed soldiers, but few wanted to join. Years passed. The world changed. New dangers appeared. Cyber attacks, terrorism, war in new forms. And still, Germany's army waited. It had uniforms, it had bases, it had tradition, but no clear role. Was it a shield? A helper? A symbol? No one could agree. Germany was a peaceful power, respected, trusted, but its army? Still searching for meaning. Some say, we must rebuild it, make it strong. Others say, no, let's keep it small, let's stay soft. And the soldiers? They stand, they serve, they wait. They are soldiers. Without a war. Chapter 8. Scandals, crashes, and cutbacks. Something was wrong, but no one wanted to say it. The German army looked serious. Uniforms, flags, rules, marches, training, missions. But behind the walls, there was trouble. Big trouble. It started with equipment. Helicopters didn't fly. Tanks didn't move. Radios didn't work. Soldiers trained with sticks instead of rifles. Some wore old boots. Some had no winter jackets. One soldier said, "We are ready to serve, but our tools are not." In 2019, a secret report was leaked. It shocked the country. Only 30% of German military equipment was ready. Planes crashed. Helicopters stopped in midair. Some ships could not leave the port. It was not a modern army. It was falling apart. Why? The answer was money. Germany is rich. But for years, it spent little on the army, less than NATO asked, less than the world expected. While other countries built new weapons, Germany saved money. And now, it was paying the price. Then came the scandals. Far-right symbols found in barracks, soldiers giving Nazi salutes, some planning attacks. The army was shocked. The people were angry. Was history returning? Was the past still hiding in the shadows? The Minister of Defense stood before cameras. She looked serious. She said, "There is no place for hate in this uniform." But the damage was done. Trust was broken. People asked, "Can we believe in this army? Can it protect us? Can it protect itself?" Recruitment numbers dropped. Fewer young people joined. More left early. Many said, "It's not the job, it's the system." The system was slow, old, full of paper, full of rules. A soldier said, "We fight 2 battles, the mission and the bureaucracy." The public began to laugh. Cartoons made jokes. News called it an army of paperwork. But for soldiers, it wasn't funny. They worked hard. They risked their lives, but they felt alone. Then, something changed. A helicopter crashed. 2 soldiers died. The media asked hard questions. Why was the helicopter flying? Was it safe? Who is responsible? The answers were slow, painful, and full of blame. Another report came. Weapons deliveries were late. Training was delayed. Computers were old. It wasn't one mistake. It was many, over many years. The government promised action, more money, more reforms, more listening. But people were tired of promises. They wanted results. They wanted pride. They wanted a real army. Inside the army, there was still hope. Young officers with fresh ideas, new leaders who listened, new recruits who believed. One female commander said, "We are not perfect, but we are changing." Slowly, things moved. New helicopters, better radios, modern training. It wasn't fast, but it was a start. Germany was waking up, not to fight, but to be ready. Because in the distance, storms were growing. An army is not just weapons and walls. It is people, trust, values. Germany had to decide. Would it fix what was broken, or wait for it to break completely? Chapter 9. From Fear to Care. A new German soldier. Once they brought fear. Now they carry hope. The German soldier has changed, not in uniform, not in name, but in heart. Long ago, the world feared the sound of German boots, marching, invading, destroying. Now that sound means something new. Today's German soldier walks into war zones to help, not to conquer. They carry tools, medicine, food, not just weapons. They are not here to take. They are here to protect. You can see them in Africa, helping build water systems, training local forces. You can find them in war-torn cities, helping children find their families, guarding peace, not creating war. It's not easy. Some still don't trust them. Some still remember the past, but many now see a different face. A German soldier, with a calm voice, an open hand, and a heart that remembers history. Because the past is never far away. Every German soldier learns it. In the classroom, in training, in silence. They visit old camps. They see the photos. They hear the stories. They say, "Never again." Not just as words, but as a promise. Today's army is small, but focused, smart, not loud, careful, not aggressive. It listens to the people. It answers to democracy. It walks with the law. And it teaches this: a real soldier protects peace, not power. Lena is a doctor, but she wears a uniform. She serves in the Army's medical team. She has been to earthquakes, floods, war zones. She once said, "I don't shoot, I save. And that is my weapon." Kevin is a pilot. He flies rescue missions. He drops food, not bombs. One day, he landed his helicopter in a flooded village. A little girl ran up and hugged him. He cried that night. He wrote, "This is what we must be. Strong, but soft. Soldiers, but human." In 2022, the world changed again. War returned to Europe. Russia invaded Ukraine. Germany watched. Then Germany acted. It sent weapons. It gave aid. It supported the people. And then it looked at its own army and asked, "Are we ready?" The answer was no, not yet. So the government made a big decision. It promised 100 billion euros to fix the army. New tanks, new planes, new training, but also new values, new goals. Not to become a superpower, but to stand tall, to help, to defend. Some were worried. Will we return to the old ways? Will we become dangerous again? But the answer was clear. Number. This is not the army of 1940. This is not the army of shame. This is the Bundeswehr, an army of a united Germany, in a free Europe, in a fragile world. It is not perfect. It still has problems. It still learns. But it has something new, a direction, a mission, a soul. The German soldier no longer brings fear. They bring care. They bring calm. They carry the weight of history and the promise of peace. The uniform has changed, and so has the heart inside it.